Hey, Detroit, welcome back to Detroit Next, a collaboration between BridgeDetroit and Detroit is Different to bring you really detailed information about all of the things that are happening election-wise this year in the city of Detroit. I'm Stephen Henderson.
I'm Malachi Barrett.
And we are back to talk about where we are in the cycle. We're just a few weeks out from the filing deadline, maybe a week, actually. And we're getting more familiar, I think, with the candidates who want to be mayor. We're also starting to get a look at some of the folks who say they want to be members of the city council. We've had a couple folks say they raise their hand, say they want to take a shot at that. This week, we are going to talk specifically about Saunteel Jenkins, who is one of the mayoral candidates, former president of the city council, former CEO of the Heat and Warmth Fund here in Detroit. We're going to have a conversation with her about her candidacy. We should start, though, with the news that is going on. This is budget season in Detroit, and we have an actual budget. It actually didn't go so badly.
No, actually, it was fairly smooth,
Yeah.
I guess. Pretty much a far cry from when Saunteel Jenkins herself was on the city council, and there was talk of, laying off police officers and shutting down recreation centers.
Yeah.
We are working with a surplus this year. We had additional funding that could go to things like the bus system, to things like a community land trust fund, to housing. And the city council actually got control of a portion of the American Federal Rescue Plan Act funding, the COVID money, which was pretty notable, I think, and maybe says something about, its relationship, the council's relationship to Mayor Duggan, because they had been fighting for some more control over those funds for a while. So they got $14 million. They put $5 of it toward homelessness programs. The rest they have split up and we'll kind of put into other things as well. But the budget process was interesting, not only because it's kind of the playbook for what gets done in Detroit and what doesn't get done, but also because it was kind of an opportunity, a showcase for two of the city council members who are running for mayor, President Sheffield and Councilmember Fred Durhall, in being able to show I can do things. I can bring money back to my district. I can fight, for programs. Do you have any kind of takeaways for how that shook out?
Well, I mean, first of all, you've got a bigger budget this year than in many, many years, I think.
It's a $3 billion
budget,
baby,
which is a testament to how much federal money has come in, but also to the way that finance has been managed in the city. This idea that we have a surplus, that you can have an argument about, well, what do we do with this money? How do we increase funding for different things? I thought that the most interesting discussion was about DDOT, transit in the city. The mayor made a proposal to increase that funding pretty dramatically, and we ended up with a big increase in that funding. I think watching council members talk about how that would matter and how much that would matter and how much it would make a difference, right? Of course, it matters to the people who ride transit, but there's so many problems. I asked Mayor Duggan 4 years ago when he was running for his third term if there was anything that he thought he had failed to even address or fix. And the first thing out of his mouth was transit and DDOT. I mean, he has had a fit trying to figure out what's wrong and push it in the right direction. Pushing this much money into it this time really says a lot about how much more there still is to do.
You also kind of see the limits of that money, too, because the council had advocated, Mayor Duggan added $20 million. The council had advocated, let's boost that by another 16.
Let's move it up. Yeah.
Ultimately, they didn't do that because the DDOT director in the administration argued that we don't have the ability to actually spend that money.
What are we going to do with it?
We are buying buses. Buses take 2 years to show up. We already have a plan for buses to arrive, this year and the following year. We're using some of that money to hire more drivers. You got to get people trained and through a pipeline. So it was kind of interesting. You see that you can't really just necessarily throw money at certain problems. There has to be a process behind how you're going to spend it.
Yeah.
City council members have to be, really thoughtful about how these programs actually work.
Yeah. And when you have something like DDOT that's not working at anywhere near 100% of its capacity or efficiency, you have to figure out what you're going to do different. And there are only so many levers you can pull. You can't hire drivers who don't exist, people who don't want to drive the buses, right? You got to have people willing to do that work. You can't hire mechanics if they don't want to do that kind of work, or if they're angry about the terms of the work under the unions, those kind of things. And those are the things that they've had a hard time with, is getting more people working the system, and so that the system works, so that the buses show up on time.
We're also going to talk to Saunteel Jenkins about her plan for public transit. I thought she had some interesting things to say. Another takeaway I have from the budget process was the elimination of a subsidy for the land
For
bank.
the land bank, yeah.
Normally we give the land bank about $10 million a year. Mayor Duggan said, let's cut that in half, basically. Let's give them 5.5. City Council said, no, let's give them
Oh, we
nothing.
got him nothing.
Part of the reason they felt comfortable doing that, or I guess the reason they felt comfortable doing that, is the land bank has about $30 million in reserves and another 20 some stashed away. And so there was a feeling that, hey, you guys are getting kind of the end of your property inventory. You've sold
Yeah.
off a lot of it. You've demolished a lot of the blight. Use your savings. We don't need to put taxpayer resources into this.
Well, and it points to the idea that the land bank was never supposed to be a permanent fixture in city government or in the city, right? This was to process all of the land that was not being processed. The city has owned all kinds of land for a long time and not done anything with it. This was to move that through the process and to catch all the land that gets taken it through tax foreclosure and all these other things, and move us to a different space where we can start thinking about, what do we do with all of this land? And in so many cases, this is empty land now because of the demolition that we've done. It's sitting fallow in people's neighborhoods. That's not much better than an abandoned house. The land bank was never really designed to be the permanent way that we were doing that, and we haven't invented another process. We haven't thought through, how should the city be doing that, and how does that integrate into the plans for redevelopment in people's neighborhoods of all of this land. So maybe this points toward the end for the land bank, or at some point, but it certainly sets up for the next mayor the expectation that maybe we're not supporting this anymore. So what else do you want to do?
That was definitely the question that was on my mind. Are we seeing, the start of the end of the land bank?
Yeah.
Also included in the budget was various requests by the city council for the housing department, the law department, other parts of the city government to take over responsibilities that the land bank is currently doing, take over some of the programs, take over some of the land that they have in the inventory. And Council President Sheffield, who, is running for mayor, wants to basically start to sunset some of that stuff and put it back under the city. So to your point, the next mayor is going to have a major say in the future of the land bank. They're currently operating without an agreement with the city.
Yeah.
The city council has decided to wait until the next mayor comes into office. So that's another thing that's going to be kind of landing on whoever's going to occupy this seat after Mayor Duggan. Really big decision on the land bank.
Yeah. I mean, the red flag here, I think, for everyone in city government is before the land bank, but when the city had control of all of this land on its own, city departments, it was a disaster. I mean, it was awful. You couldn't get land that was, if there was a lot next to your house in many cases and that you wanted, there was no real way to make that happen. The land bank has not been perfect. And some people would say it's caused new problems that we didn't have before, but it was a step forward. The question is, what's the next step forward? It's not, how do we go back, I think, to what we were doing before? Because nobody, I think, will be happy with that.
It's funny when you said that, because there are folks that would equally describe the land bank as somewhat disastrous.
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't worked the way that they promised it would, and there's no question that we need to move on from that model. It's just, let's move forward. Let's not go back. Let's not go back. Before we get to Saunteel Jenkins, we should talk about, though, the subject of executive experience and the managerial kind of approach and experience in this job. The reason I think Saunteel is a good kind of vessel to begin that conversation is because she's somebody who has a lot of that experience, right? She was the CEO of the Heating and Warmth Fund, of fairly large nonprofit in the city. That kind of experience is 100%, relevant to the job of mayor, where you are the executive and you have a lot of decisions to make about money, about management, about people and talent. If you were looking at the field, Jenkins is not the only one who has that kind of experience, but she has a lot of it, and she has it at a very big organization. There's some others though who've had a chance to lead and will draw on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, Chief Craig comes to mind, right? He was the executive of the police department. Uh, Somewhat different role, but again, you're leading, you're at the top of an organization within the city government. Also, Reverend Solomon Kinlock, who was at the top of a large church organization in Southeast Michigan, all the way up to Flint. They have
Yeah.
40,000 some members, so
Right.
he's leading them on Sundays. He's also balancing the budget
Mhm.
of that organization, and is certainly, I think you could describe that as executive experience, right?
Yeah. And the question for some of the others is, if you don't have that experience, then what is it that you point to that says, all right, I'm ready for this, and I could be ready on day one to do the job of mayor. So if you're Mary Sheffield, I mean, you're the president of the city council. You're the most recognizable, I think, name in the race. The only poll I've seen done about this puts her pretty far ahead of everybody else. But I think at some point she'll have to try to talk about, well, uh, you know, being president of the city council, not the same thing as being mayor. So what is it that she will draw from to do that? Fred Durhal, who's a member of council and was in the legislature, both elected jobs, and has been really competent in both of those roles. They aren't executive roles. So what is it that prepares somebody like that? Um, I've seen so many people run for mayor who haven't had that kind of executive experience, and often they think of the job being very different
Mm.
from what it is. Kwame Kilpatrick is another example of that. I mean, the first few years of him being mayor were a struggle because some of what he was doing was trying to figure out all of these different things that are your responsibility and what levers to pull at which time, make sure things work, and then how you deal with a crisis, emergency, which is always a possibility. Now, in the end, he ended up being one of the better managerial heads of Detroit government before he got himself into a lot of trouble for other things. But it took us some time to get there. Detroiters are really deciding in this field whether they want to do that again. Let somebody grow in the job, or put somebody at the head who's ready from the beginning.
I think the budget process too is also a good symbol of kind of the difference of the executive versus the city council.
Yeah,
They spent a whole week debating and negotiating for minor fund adjustments to get some of the council
that's right.
priorities funded. Ultimately affected like 2% of the overall budget.
Right.
Whereas Mayor Duggan puts together the budget
The whole
recommendation
thing,
of $3
right.
billion, and
Yeah.
this is what he's coming to the table with. Whereas the council members have a lot less say. Ultimately they authorize the budget, but they have a lot less say in how that all shakes out. And the kind of importance of being able to project yourself as the executive is important as well. I think we see that in Attorney Todd Perkins, who launched his campaign recently,
Yeah.
pitched himself as a self-made CEO. And, he has his own law firm
Yeah.
and has, some employees under him. But I thought that was interesting and kind of notable to this conversation around the executive experience being important to this, that you would promote yourself as a CEO as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think people are using that word, right? Or that term where they can, right? I am a CEO. I was a CEO. Mayor is a CEO, right? And there's no question that it is. Okay, we're going to get to Santiel Jenkins and what she has to say about her hopes to be mayor. Want to remind everyone that we want you to be part of this production as well. Give us a call, send us an email. Let us know what you're interested in, what you're hearing. If you have a encounter with a candidate for mayor or city council, we'd love to hear about that and maybe share that with the folks who are watching here as well. You can also, of course, support Detroit is Different and Bridge Detroit, who are investing an awful lot of resources in this to make sure that we get you this information.
All right, I'm here with mayoral candidate Saunteel Jenkins. Thank you so much for joining us on Detroit Next.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
So I think your experience in this race is a little unique compared to the rest of the candidates. You served on the city council. You've
Yes.
also been running up until fairly recently when you decided to run for mayor, pretty large nonprofit organization.
Mm.
Tell us about how those experiences and other experiences and other roles that you've had have prepared you to take on the big job of being the mayor of Detroit.
Sure. I believe my experience is unique as well. I'll start with the fact that I've been a CEO for over a decade, and the mayor is the CEO of the city of Detroit. So that experience is paramount. As a legislator or a council member, you're passing ordinances, you're writing them and passing them. You are amending the budget and passing the budget, but you're not responsible for implementing those things, right? A CEO has to manage whatever budget is put in place. They have to manage the policies and the rules of governance that are in place. So understanding that the buck stops with you as a CEO and how the intended and unintended consequences of policies and budgets impact your bottom line and the people you're serving. And a CEO has to make tough decisions often. So I feel having the legislative experience on city council and being a CEO, as well as experience in nonprofit, for profit, government, and education all make me uniquely prepared for this position.
For folks that don't know what the Heating and Warmth Fund is,
Mm.
give us kind of an overview of like the responsibilities of that organization and things that you did, to really serve kind of the base needs of a lot of Detroiters because
Mhm.
that organization, not to get ahead of your answer, but basically what I see it as kind of a social service organization that tries to make sure people can afford their utility bills, right?
Yeah, you summed it up well. The Heat and Warmth Fund has been around since 1985. And since 1985, they've been providing assistance with heat and electricity for struggling families across the state. It's a statewide organization. When I came in 2014, one of the biggest issues we were having across the city was increasing affordability, um, issues with water.
Hmm.
And I started THAW's first water program in 30 years in 2015. So now it's heat, electricity, and water. We also provide assistance with home repairs, and we have programs for people with chronic health conditions and mothers with high risk pregnancies because all of those things are impacted by whether or not you can stay warm at night, whether or not you can refrigerate your medicine, or whether or not you have clean, safe water in your house.
At THAW, you also helped create a $5 million grant program, state funded, that helped residents of the state pay off their water bill debt.
Yeah.
You talked about adding that to the heating and warmth
Mm.
piece of it.
Yes.
What's the impact of that been? I mean, we hear a lot about water affordability
Mhm.
issues and the shutoff crisis during COVID, and there
Yes.
was a moratorium on that for a period of time that's been
Mhm.
lifted now. Um, what has been your experience with water affordability in the city, and how did that program help?
Oh, the impact of that program has been huge. I started advocating in the legislature for assistance with water, I guess, soon as I got to THAW. And when I got there, many legislators were still saying, no, water's the most affordable utility, which was true, but that was quickly changing. And affordable to some is still not affordable to others. So the importance of having the water affordability, I kept pushing, and fortunately, I was able to get a $5 million allocation from the legislature before Democrats had a trifecta. I think that's important
Yeah, this
because
was
I
under
had to
Republican control.
correct. I had to work across the aisle to get this done, which our next mayor will have to do as well. But the impact of families having clean, safe water is immeasurable, especially after COVID, right? During and after COVID, it's been so important. The other thing that that program does is provide minor plumbing repairs. So we'll replace toilets and repair leaks that drive up a bill as well. So that makes your bill more affordable long term because it's more efficient. Your home is more efficient.
Do you, there was a lot of pressure on the water department at the city as we were kind of coming out of the pandemic.
Mhm.
pressure to continue a moratorium on water
Mhm.
shutoffs, and ultimately the city decided that they were going to implement some programs to make it easier for people to tackle the debt that they had in the
Yes.
water system. But water shutoffs have come back. What
Yes.
what would be your approach on that issue? Would you do things differently? Would you reinstate some kind of moratorium, or what's your philosophy on
Yeah.
shutoffs in general?
I think the city has to make the programs that are in place easier for people to access. They're not very easy for people to access right now, but I don't think a moratorium is the answer. During COVID, one of the things that happened was the moratorium on shutoffs. It was good and it was needed during COVID, but when COVID ended, those bills were still there. But people were in a tougher position because a bill that might have been $200 was now $2,000. And that was water, that was heat, that was electricity. So we're not helping people by delaying the problem and letting it multiply. You help people by finding solutions to make their bills more affordable long term.
And what is that? Help me understand the problem here of people racking up this insane debt. I would imagine part of it's an income problem, right?
Absolutely.
Part of it might be on the city. We need to find ways to bring down the cost of these things. But how are people coming into so much debt in the first place?
There are basically two ways to reduce people's utility bills or the burden of their utility bills. The first is to increase their income. The second is to decrease their costs. You decrease their costs by making their home more energy efficient, right? You reduce the water usage. Part of it is education, right? At THAW, we educate people on how to conserve water, how to conserve energy, but there isn't enough conservation we can teach if all the heat is going through a hole in your roof. So we have to find ways to help people make their homes more energy efficient by fixing the roof, by offering ways for people to get new windows. And those are the kind of solutions that I created while at Thaw because I knew as long as we didn't address the root cause of the problem, every year people would have to come back, especially seniors, because their incomes aren't going up and their homes aren't getting newer.
Mm.
So what can we do to address the problem?
What would your approach have been at the time to backseat quarterback this, I guess, a little bit? Because one frustration that I had heard about how this, what was decided for this funding was that it happened, during the pandemic, and so a lot of these were virtual meetings.
Mhm,
So basically, I'm asking you about, your approach to public engagement and
mhm,
transparency,
mhm.
and how you make decisions, in partnership with community. Like,
Yeah.
how would
Mhm.
you go about that?
Yeah. So one of the items on Santiel's 6 priorities is strategic master planning.
Mhm.
And the reason that's important and the reason I bring it up is because part of it is and has to be community input. It is input from residents across the city about what they believe their neighborhood, their community should look like. First of all, the master plan should be one for each of the 7 districts because we now have districts. Our master planning should account for that. But in District 1, that community would have full input into the plan. Land use, public safety, education should be a part of it, business development, clean energy, all of those things should be a part of the strategic master plan. And if, for instance, the residents in District 1 say they want 2 restaurants and a grocery store and a cleaners, then we should be offering tax incentives to people who are going to bring 2 restaurants, a grocery store, and a cleaners.
Mhm.
The transparency that provides is, 1, nobody's surprised about the grocery store because they help decide what it should look like. 2, nobody's surprised about tax incentives because the written plan says developers who are gonna bring these things, we're gonna provide these incentives for you, this level of incentives, and it's higher if you live in the district, it's slightly lower if you live in the Detroit, but not the district, and it's lower than that if you don't live in the city. So that's the kind of transparency that I wanna create in government, not just with master planning, but across the board. Citizens should have a say.
I was talking to a former state lawmaker, who I
Mhm.
will not name, about this concept of having a master plan for every city council district. We're in
Mhm.
the middle of creating a citywide master plan right
Yes.
now.
Mhm.
The first time we've done it in about a decade, and then
Mhm.
there's a number of other strategic neighborhood plans,
Yes.
I think they're
Mhm.
called,
The
for
strategic neighborhood p yes.
different parts of the city. Like my neighborhood has one. I'm not sure if everyone does, but incrementally, like neighborhoods have been getting these plans.
Right.
And so when I brought up the idea of, another kind of planning effort, this person was kind of like, that sounds good. I think we all agree that there should be public engagement and strategic decision making and everything.
Mhm.
But also, I want a mayor who's going to do things. And also, residents have kind of told public officials what they need in their neighborhoods a lot already.
Mm.
That creating kind of another planning process is asking people, it's asking a lot for folks to kind
Mhm.
of get involved in another city planning decision. So I just wanted to get your feedback from that. What's your response to that?
So 2 things. One, our current planning process is about land use,
Hmm.
right? Which is a very important part of planning, but it's not the only thing that goes into planning, right? And all those things that I just talked about need to be a part of planning as well. If it's just land use, things like a brand new sidewalk on a block with no houses happen, right? If we have a strategic master plan that accounts for everything, when we get ARPA dollars, we can just go to our master plan and say, you know what, these are the places that we can invest these dollars because it's already in place. And as far as community input, I have not had one resident in a home meeting. I have had one person say to me, I think residents are all planned out. And it was a business person,
Hmm.
it wasn't a resident. I haven't had one resident say to me, I'm all planned out. And the other piece is not every neighborhood is included in those conversations.
Yeah. I definitely agree on the latter part of that. I think there are people that have been left out of the conversation.
Yes.
What do you do to get them involved? I mean, especially when there's a kind of disillusionment or a frustration with city government, probably earned in a lot of cases, right?
Mhm.
These are people that probably tried to get involved at one point and were pushed out.
Right.
And also, maybe the city hasn't come around in a while and asked their opinion
Mhm.
on anything.
Right.
How do we reach out to some of those,
Mhm.
kind of forgotten pockets of the city?
You you go everywhere, right? You do as much as possible what I'm doing now, talking to Detroiters all over the city. But the other piece is you have to deliver on your promises, right? And while the master planning process will take longer, there are little things along the way that we could do to, right, to give residents confidence that, okay, she's going to do what she said she would do, right? While we're doing this, going through this planning process, there's this building on the corner over here that has been sitting there, open to trespass for 2 years, and we've been calling and nobody responded. There's a senior building that needs repairs and nobody has responded when we call. Those are things that the city can do right now while we're in the process that will help reinstill faith, right, in our government for residents.
You mentioned Saunteel 6, your 6 policy
Yes.
priorities.
Mhm.
Lay those out for us, and then we
Yeah.
can dive into it a little bit more.
Yeah, the Santiel 6 are neighborhoods that are vibrant and safe. Number 2 is safety because safety is non-negotiable. Number 3 is economic opportunity and jobs for all. Number 4 is putting small businesses back in business because it is the backbone of this city, especially Black and women-owned businesses. Number 5 is partnership with our schools because we have to have stronger schools to have a stronger city. And then number 6 is public transit to bring it all together.
Mhm.
And we can talk more specifically about whichever of those
We
you'd
could
like.
probably have a podcast about each of them individually.
Yes, for sure.
I want to start with public safety because that's a top issue that we get a lot of feedback on. When we
Mhm.
had first met, you explained to me, the story of losing your brother to gun violence, and
Mm.
we don't have to go through all of that right here.
Thank you.
But I do know that I bring it up because you've been personally impacted by this
Mm.
issue,
Yes.
and I want to know, what is your plan for making the city safer? There's been a lot of celebration in the last few years about
Mhm.
crime rates trending in the right direction,
Mhm.
in Detroit taking advantage of some new partnerships with community organizations
Mm.
to bring down shootings. And I think people are, celebrating that, but also very concerned about, where that could head. And also, when you're in a neighborhood where something has happened, you're not celebrating
That's
alongside
right.
the places that
Right.
have been, made safer. So
Yeah. There are still neighborhoods in this city who are asking, why are people celebrating? Or feel left out because they say, well, those historic lows aren't happening on my block, right? So we really have to be careful while we're celebrating the progress. We have to make sure that we're clear about the fact that we know that our work is not done, right? Until every child in this city feels safe, until every parent feels safe sending their son or daughter to the store, our work is not done. So it's twofold. And I think it's always really important when we talk about community safety to talk about prevention, because the answer is not over policing a community, right? Some of this is about making sure that people have safe places and spaces to go. And it's about making sure that our kids understand that there are good options for them and us giving them access to those good options so that they make better choices. And you know, I do want to tell you about my brother because when my brother died, my mom, when I went through my grief stages and I was going to quit school and I was in my anger stage, my mother said to me that I shouldn't quit school because although my brother was loved and hugged every day, the kids who thought his jacket was worth more than his life needed an intervention. And she said if they had been loved more, my brother might be alive. So, and I tell that story because it's so important. There aren't any throwaway kids, and it's important that we catch kids early and make sure that they know that there are great options available to them and that we're creating safe places and safe spaces during the hours of 3 p.m. and 8 p.m., which are the most dangerous hours for kids. It's important that we can flip, right, the model that we currently have where we're spending $5 on the jail for every $1 we spend on prevention and after school programming, because those are the things that will make our kids safer and more prosperous long term. Now, you layer on top of that community policing, which is important, and making sure that our police are invested in our neighborhoods and communities and that our residents know who they are because they're showing up in good times and bad.
Mhm.
That, as Benny Napoleon, God rest his soul, used to call them beat cops, are actually walking the beat and stopping at the coffee shop, or the grocery store and saying, hey, I'm Officer Tony. Good to see you today. You need anything? No? Okay. I'm leaving, right? So that's important. Building those relationships between youth and police are important. And the community violence intervention is also a piece of it.
The last thing I want to talk to you about is just framing our thinking around the choice that is, in front of voters this year.
Mm.
We're coming out of an era of this city where we've had, one person at the top for about a decade,
Mhm.
longer than a decade, really.
Mhm.
And I hear some optimism from folks
Mhm.
about the opportunity that presents, and then also some fear about if we make the wrong decision, what happens.
Mhm.
Help me, get this across to voters how important this election is. How are you
Mhm.
talking to people about that?
So someone said to me earlier today, this is the most important election since Coleman Young was elected. And I was like, wow. Um, and it was in terms of a few things, right? It's where we are right now in this moment in this city's history. It's where we are right now in this moment in this country's history. It is where we are right now fiscally in this city. It is where we are in terms of what people see as a battle between downtown and neighborhoods. It's not a battle. It is about both. Healthy neighborhoods feed a healthy downtown, and a healthy downtown feeds healthy neighborhoods. So we need a mayor who really is about both and. The battle can't be Detroit versus Lansing or Detroit versus Macomb County. Right now, it is us versus the rest of the world. So when we're out there trying to attract new industries and major corporations, I should be talking to Macomb and Oakland and our Wayne County executive to say, hey, I need you all to go with me to pitch this because this helps all of us. So this is a time in the city where having a social worker is so important because social workers look at the big picture. Social workers build coalitions, and social workers know how to get things done on a shoestring budget and on a balling budget. So we need a mayor who is about both and I'm that mayor, Saunteel Jenkins. I'd like to be.
Well, let's leave it right there. Ladies and gentlemen, Santiel Jenkins, thank you so much for joining us on
Thank
Detroit
you.
Next.
Thank you. SaunteelJenkins.com. Thank you.
All right, that was our conversation with Santiel Jenkins. Folks, we are going to keep this rolling with more candidates to come. If you like what we're doing, this is a community-driven effort. We need your help. So please support us, bring us information, and also support the organizations that are making this happen. Detroit is Different and Bridge Detroit. Tell us what you think, what you're hearing from folks. If you run into any candidates out there, if you got questions for them, we definitely want to hear them. We have set up a phone line to take those questions at 313-284-6407. So leave us a voicemail. We are going to do a episode, hopefully, of voicemails that we get from folks. So I really want you guys to call that line. You guys are reaching out to me on Twitter, but I want to hear your voice.
Yeah.
Give us your name and your neighborhood where you're at in the city. Again, that number is 313-284-6407. You can also hit us on email at info@bridgedetroit.com. Detroit Next is a community-led project from Bridge Detroit and Detroit is Different, which means we can't do this work without you. Please help us out. And definitely keep listening for more content about 2025 elections here in Detroit.
Yeah, we'll be back soon.
Detroit Next is a community-led project from Bridge Detroit and Detroit is Different, which means that we can't do this work without you. We need your support. If you have a question or a comment and want to participate in this process throughout the year, give us a call. We have a phone line set up at 313-284-6407. Leave us a message and we'll play it on the podcast. If you like what we're doing, head to bridgedetroit.com and subscribe to our newsletters. All of that content, again, is free, no paywalls for anybody. We're trying to make this as accessible as possible. Head to our YouTube channel to get full episodes and interviews along with extra content throughout the year. You can also find the audio version of this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and DetroitNext.podbean.com. We're going to be doing this all year long, so stay with us. Follow Bridge Detroit and Detroit is Different on your favorite social media platforms and take this ride with us. Thanks.